Let's begin. Here are the threats. Bishop takes bishop. Bishop takes pawn. Rook takes rook. Let us look at checks in puzzle position. Rook to f4 check. Here is the solution to the puzzle. Rook takes rook. Bishop takes rook check. King takes bishop. Let's see the next puzzle. Here are the threats. Knight takes pawn. Queen takes pawn. Queen takes rook. Checks in puzzle position are: knight to h5 check. Knight to e4 check. Queen to e5 check. Here is the solution to the puzzle. Queen takes rook. Queen takes queen. Knight to e4 check. King to f4. Knight takes queen. Let's see the next puzzle. Let us look at threats in puzzle position. Knight takes pawn. Pawn takes pawn. Queen takes pawn. Bishop takes pawn. Here are the checks. Queen to e2 check. Solution to the puzzle is: rook to f8. Queen to e2. Rook takes pawn. Queen takes rook. Bishop takes queen. Let's see the next puzzle. Here are the threats. King takes pawn. There are no checks in this position. The puzzle is solved using h4. King to g5. h3. Next puzzle, the threats are: bishop takes knight. Bishop takes pawn. There are no checks in this position. Here is the solution to the puzzle. Bishop takes knight. Bishop takes bishop. Rook to e1. Queen takes rook check. Knight takes queen. Another one. Threats in this position are: rook takes pawn. Rook takes bishop check. Queen takes pawn. Here are the checks. Rook to e4 check. Rook takes bishop check. Queen to f3 check. Queen to e4 check. Queen to f1 check. Queen to e1 check. Queen to d1 check. The puzzle is solved using c3. Bishop takes pawn. Rook to e4 check. Queen takes rook. Queen takes queen check. Next puzzle, the threats are: queen takes pawn. Rook takes pawn. Checks in this position are: queen to b6 check. Bishop to c5 check. Answer to this puzzle is: bishop to c5 check. King to h1. Bishop to d4. Queen takes bishop. Pawn takes queen. Let's see the next puzzle. Let us look at threats in puzzle position. Bishop takes pawn. The checks are: rook to d7 check. Queen to h6 check. Rook to e7 check. Solution to the puzzle is: bishop to a6. Rook to g8. Bishop takes bishop. Another puzzle. Let us look at threats in puzzle position. Bishop takes pawn check. Bishop takes pawn. Queen takes knight. Here are checks in puzzle position. Bishop takes pawn check. The best move in puzzle position is: bishop takes pawn. Queen takes bishop. Bishop takes pawn check. Rook takes bishop. Queen takes queen. Let's see the next puzzle. Threats in puzzle position are: rook takes rook. Checks in puzzle position are: f3 check. h3 check. Rook to g3 check. Rook to d2 check. The best move in puzzle position is: rook takes rook. Pawn takes rook. King to e7. Promotes to rook. King takes rook. Let's see the next puzzle. The threats are: knight takes pawn. Knight takes pawn. Knight takes pawn. There are no checks in this position. Here is the solution to the puzzle. Queen to b6. Rook takes pawn. King takes rook. Next, the threats are: queen takes pawn check. Rook takes rook. Let us look at checks in puzzle position. Queen takes pawn check. Solution to the puzzle is: f6. Queen takes pawn. Queen takes queen. Rook takes rook. Queen to c6. Another puzzle. Here are threats in puzzle position. Pawn takes pawn check. Rook takes pawn. The checks are: pawn takes pawn check. Solution to the puzzle is: king to h6. Pawn takes pawn. Pawn takes pawn. One more. Threats in this position are: knight takes pawn. Knight takes pawn check. The checks are: knight takes pawn check. b3 check. The best move in puzzle position is: b3 check. King to d3. Knight to f2, check. Let us go to the next puzzle. Puzzle position vulnerabilities are: bishop takes pawn, queen takes pawn, queen takes rook, queen takes queen, check. Checks in puzzle position are: queen takes queen, check. Solution to the puzzle is: queen to d2, queen takes bishop, queen takes queen, check. One more. The threats are: bishop takes knight, queen takes rook. There are no checks in this position. The answer is: bishop to e6, rook takes pawn, check, king takes rook. Another puzzle. Threats in this position are: rook takes pawn. The checks are: g6, check, rook to h1, check. Solution to the puzzle is: g3, rook to b8, g2, rook to b7, check, king to f6. One more. Let us look at threats in puzzle position. Knight takes bishop, knight takes knight, check, rook takes rook. Checks in this position are: knight takes knight, check. The answer is: knight takes bishop, bishop to c2, queen to c1, rook takes rook, queen takes rook. Let us go to the next puzzle. The threats are: queen takes pawn, check, queen takes pawn, check, queen takes bishop, bishop takes bishop, rook takes bishop. Checks in this position are: queen takes pawn, check, queen takes pawn, check, bishop to h6, check. The puzzle is solved using: rook takes bishop, pawn takes rook, queen to e5, check, rook to f6, bishop takes pawn. Let us go to the next puzzle. Puzzle position vulnerabilities are: rook takes knight, queen takes knight, queen takes pawn, check. Checks in this position are: queen takes pawn, check. The puzzle is solved using: queen takes knight. Another puzzle. Let us look at threats in puzzle position. King takes rook. There are no checks in this position. The puzzle is solved using: king to h1, rook to g1, check, rook takes rook, rook to h7, check, queen takes rook. Let us go to the next puzzle. Let us look at threats in puzzle position. Queen takes pawn, check, queen takes pawn, rook takes pawn, check. Here are checks in puzzle position. Queen to f7, check, queen takes pawn, check, rook takes pawn, check. Answer to this puzzle is: queen to e7, knight to g5, h4, queen to d8, queen takes queen, rook takes queen, pawn takes knight. Another one. The threats are: knight takes pawn, check, bishop takes pawn, queen takes pawn. Here are checks in puzzle position. Knight takes pawn, check, knight to g7, check. Answer to this puzzle is: knight takes pawn, check, king to f7, knight takes bishop, rook to e8, check, king to f1. Another puzzle. Threats in this position are: rook takes rook, check, rook takes pawn, queen takes pawn, queen takes pawn, check. Checks in puzzle position are: rook takes rook, check, queen takes pawn, check. Here is the solution to the puzzle. Bishop to c4, queen takes bishop, rook takes rook, check, bishop takes rook, pawn takes queen. Let's continue. The threats are: queen takes rook, check, queen takes pawn, check, queen takes pawn, bishop takes pawn. Checks in puzzle position are: queen takes rook, check, queen to h6, check, queen takes pawn, check. The best move in puzzle position is: queen takes pawn, check, king to g7, queen to e5, check, rook to f6, bishop takes pawn. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe.